I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. We're bringing together experts, thinkers, and leaders, busting myths, sharing stories, and staying connected when Canadians need it the most. We're having unexpected conversations for unprecedented times. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Hello, Tamara. Yes, well, we're busy, but I'm really glad to join you today. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because, we've talked a lot about how this pandemic has affected people in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
But domestic violence,
Yes,
and violence against women is its own crisis.
it is.
And now we have two pandemics on our hands, really, and I just want to know, where are your challenges right now? Like, what does it look like in your world right now with the work you do?
Yeah, you're right, Tamara. We're talking about a pandemic on top of a pandemic. We've had for decades just extraordinary amounts of domestic and sexual violence all across the land, and certainly here in Metro Vancouver and British Columbia, that we've been attempting to address in a bunch of different ways. The organization that I work for, Battered Women Support Services, joins a number of other frontline organizations that have been working for at least the last 40 years to not only deliver services, because in some ways we take the services for granted that we have right now. There was a time when there weren't any of these services, and it was really only because of the advocacy and of women organizing together that we were able to get to this particular point of seeing some changes. And so when we saw that COVID-19 was not going to be the flu, I started to think, okay, well, what's going on in China? Just to connect with my colleagues, that was really helpful, because what I learned was that they were experiencing just overwhelming need for services and organizing to help women in Beijing and in Guangzhou. And so we wanted to get out in front of this at that point. And thinking,
so how do you do that? What did they tell you, or what did you learn from them that allowed you to be proactive?
Well, they stated the obvious, which was the isolation was going to, the social isolation was going to compound the experiences of isolation that women that are dealing with domestic violence, sexual violence are already experiencing. And so it was so obvious. And then from that point of view, we knew that we had to definitely get front and center. So we started to, the first thing we did is that we updated our website with the feedback that I received from colleagues in China, which was to get the word out as much as possible, so that every single person, woman that was dealing with violence in their home, as well as the broader community, would understand that there were services available. It was just to bring a consciousness around this fact. And we just, in some ways, domestic violence, sexual violence has been so normalized in our society. So as a result of that, we miss the forest for the trees, in a sense, because everyone is focusing on social distancing then, and we forget about what does social distancing mean for some of the most vulnerable within our community. And so we did what everybody does, which is to get on the internet and to update our homepage on our website with some resources and information, and with a campaign that we thought was just straight to the point. Are you co-quarantined with your abusive partner? We can help.
Right. And how do you help? Like, what, for somebody that has no idea what you do, because they've never needed to use your services, they don't know anybody who's ever needed to use them. How do you explain that to somebody? What is it that you do to help?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that we do, which is in line with what we wanted to do around this, was to make visible that which is rendered invisible. Most of what we're talking about is private, happens in the privacy of the home, happens with people that we know, people that we love, people that are there, to protect us, or have some responsibility for our care. that have some responsibility to be in relationship. And so that is not usually what many of us grow up to learn, is that mostly we think about the danger, particularly around sexual violence anyway, is outside with strangers. And we do all kinds of things to modify our behavior to quote unquote prevent that. So we want to make visible that which happens in the home. So that's what we do first and foremost. And then from there, we have a crisis line, which up until very recently was open during the day, during the week. And the crisis line ends up being a point of contact. But even more than that, Tamara, starting way back, the founding women of BWSS recognized that the isolation is what we want to alleviate. So we have been operating support groups. And in fact, one support group we've been operating up until recently because of COVID-19. We've been operating for 40 years, a drop-in group, every Tuesday from noon until 2 at our unpublished location here in Vancouver. So that's one thing, is to have the crisis line where someone can call and get information and to explore their experiences and to have their experiences validated. Then we encourage, anyone that calls the line, we then work to help them come and access us in a physical sense, to come to our space, either to see a support group or to meet with a support worker. So our services are designed to alleviate isolation and then to assess for safety and to help survivors make a safety plan, which is to look at the factors of danger, the threat, as well as lethality.
So, Angela, now I don't know if we're in the middle of this pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know where none of us really do. Yes. But your calls have increased. I mean, you're getting calls that you probably never received before.
That's right. And that's what we wanted. That's right. That's what we wanted. We expected, once we got the campaign underway through social and mainstream media, which I was really glad that we got some great media attention and the campaign was featured. We've used social media to get the word out. Then we realized, oh my goodness, if we're going to have a campaign, we're going to have to be available for people to call beyond our daytime, which are up until very recently, our crisis line was open during the day, during the week. So we went 24 hours, literally overnight. We went 24 hours overnight, and we've just been building ourselves around responding to those calls. And what we saw was then an incremental increase in callers from 50% to 100% until peak time, which was 300%.
Wow.
And those calls were, most of the calls were from new callers, people that we'd never heard of from before, which we were so glad about that. And so they were from women that were currently in abusive relationships who wanted to explore what options were available if they needed to leave. Some wanted to make a plan to leave right away. And so we, helped make that plan with them. Some were, sort of just wanted to get information. We heard from women that had left abusive relationships who, as a result of now being socially isolated, were feeling lonely. And, well,
that must be, so terrifying, because we are told, stay home. It's the best thing you can do is stay home. But we know that home is unsafe for a lot of people. And then it's, well, where do you go if you can't be home? And so, to hear you say, oh, we were so glad that our calls increased by 300%. You're glad, right? Because women know now that you're there. They may not have known about you before. So it's your happiness, it really is coming from a place of you're reaching more people and you're able to now help more people.
That is the lesson that we learned from the colleagues in China, was to get the word out. And so we want to reach, as much as we can, anybody that's concerned about their experiences. And so far, most of the calls have been coming from British Columbia. However, we've been getting calls from the rest of Canada, quite a bit of calls from Ontario, and then calls from other regions of the world, which has been also really, really good, I would say. In some
Do you think are people, sorry, Angela, to interrupt, but are people scared to call you?
So it's really hard to, many women that will call our line initially are nervous to acknowledge their experiences. There's a sense of just being nervous, and some will say, I don't know. I don't know if this is the right line for me to call.
Right.
I'm not sure. And then they'll, and our point is then to say, well, please say more, and then we learn more about the relationship and more about what's going on. But mostly callers at the, initially are really tentative. It's hard to break the silence. If I'm going to talk about women specifically, and this is, of course, women are not a homogeneous, we're relational. And we put a lot of energy and interest into being in relationships, to being in committed relationships, and we're rewarded to be in relationships. And so to learn that a relationship, to experience that a relationship is hurting us, it takes a lot to begin to make that visible and to tell others.
So maybe you could give us, because I'm trying to, as women, we're strong, right?
Yes,
we're caregivers. We're tough. We give birth. We do all these things that are very hard, and we just do it because that's who we are, and that's how we're brought up to. It's very interesting. So the only thing I can kind of compare it to is I was very sick one time and I had to call 911. Like I was dying on my bed, but I didn't want to call 911 because I thought I could just go there. I couldn't. And, my best friend was there and she was like, we're calling 911 right now. And I just thought it wasn't that much of an emergency to call 911. And so when you just said that, some women are nervous to call because they feel like, oh, maybe this isn't the right line to call. Can you give us some examples of when a woman has thought, maybe I don't need to call, but really you do need to call? Like I think we have this idea of what domestic violence is or sexual violence is, but there's a spectrum, isn't there?
Absolutely. And your point about the the ambivalence of calling, in part because we don't want to perhaps maybe recognize the fact that the relationship is not good, or that there's something that we did that's wrong, and we can have an extraordinarily abusive relationship, Tamara, as without anybody being hit. Most abusive partners will use tactics of power and control, which a whole version of different actions that are in and of themselves, abusive, but nobody's being hit. And it's really only but most have the threat of violence there. So we can have isolation, emotional abuse, denying, minimizing, and blaming, using children, financial abuse. And we did some research a few years ago with women that access our services, and 80% of women who access our services said that they were experiencing financial abuse in their relationship.
What does financial abuse look like?
It looks like controlling the financial resources, either in not having unrealistic expectations about what things cost and criticizing spending, controlling having women be on an allowance and controlling the spending, or in some instances giving women all the money and then having critiques about what's spent, having the situation where if there's two incomes, the woman's income is used for the family needs, such as everything maybe around the housing, food, and then the male partner's needs. His income is used for his entertainment. Maybe the things that interest him, that are about his friends and his toys, cars, or golf, or other activities, and then having unrealistic expectations about what those things cost in terms of childcare. That's a big way that financial abuse happens, for sure, and that it's one of the main reasons why women don't leave, as well as housing and children. Those are two big reasons why women will stay in abusive relationships.
Wow. So that is something that I haven't really considered before, because I think we have this idea of who should be calling, for how that's very, so what are some other themes maybe that you are hearing from people calling during this period? What are some, can you talk in broad terms?
I can. So I'll start with the callers that we've heard from outside of Canada, which has been a portion who are in abusive relationships. And we've had a handful of callers who are in other regions of Canada, women who are in abusive relationships, who are wanting to get back to Canada. They want to leave their abusive partner, get back to Canada, and so that's one theme of calls that we've had. Another theme are women that are in abusive relationships where their partner is not following social distancing, maybe is out and not washing hands, not giving information about where he's going, what he's doing, gone for extended periods of time, coming back and not not washing hands, not following kind of those social distancing and being angry when she wants to bring it up. We have a range of other kinds of ways in which women are dealing with COVID-related things, such as holding care cards, having increased isolation by saying you can't go outside because the danger is outside, which is actually something that we've wanted the leaders in terms of the public health officer and others to begin making it plain that if you're in harm's way right now at home, that it's okay to leave. We actually want that stated explicitly from the public health officers as well as the Prime Minister. We actually want that stated explicitly because right now it is a reason why that women aren't leaving. Is the fear of contracting. And there are resources that are available that aren't only transition houses, which are important and usually are core residential resource. There are other resources. Many of us have now been able to secure hotel rooms where, hotel operators in Vancouver, downtown Vancouver, the hotels are empty now. And so we have a floor right now, and some of our colleagues also have hotel rooms that are available. So there are non-communal options for women right now where they can go with their children with or without symptoms. That's the other thing, is that there's if you have any kind of symptom, there's places to go. And so that's something that we've been working on right now, is getting the word out so that women know that there's an option.
So, it's interesting because the name Battered Women, right? The things that you have described as abuse are things that many of us, most of us as women, have experienced at some point in our lives in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yes. And you're right. We don't talk about this. There's a stigma attached to it. You are weak if this is happening to you. You aren't strong if this is happening to you. These ideas that maybe we put into our own heads or that we get from external sources. What do you want women to know? What is your, you've been doing this for a long time and you are an incredible voice for women and all, you're a frontline worker, and everybody that works with you is, what do you want women to know about their safety and their home life and what you do?
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to just talk about the name Battered Women Support Services.
Mm-hmm. Please, yes.
In some ways, we've got lots of feedback about it over the years, for sure, and that it doesn't necessarily resonate with a lot of people because battered is very clear what that is. And the founding women of BWSS they wanted to put it out. This was 1979, and they wanted to draw attention. We take some of the things right now for granted. There was a time when issues of domestic violence, sexual violence, violence against women was not discussed at all. And in some ways, we recognize that the name could be a barrier because we often hear from women saying, well, I'm not battered. Mm. And that goes to your point about how endemic those power imbalances can be within gender relationships. And the patriarchy, if I could say that word.
Yes, you can.
is it is an ideology and a social structure that is in effect in Canada and a whole bunch of countries all around the world, and that is been baked in to the laws and the policies, and to the point where it's invisible. It's just sort of, it's baked in. We can't see it, but they are in effect every day, and they play themselves out in all kinds of ways, and certainly are present in abusive relationships. So many women are also about finding our voice and our power and using our power in the world and in relationships, because our socialization still is about being not necessarily perceiving or not really having an idea of equity and equality. Still there's hierarchical ideas around gender that we are being raised into and act out. So these are the things that we want to disrupt. We think that a more equitable society means that we're confronting these social problems and looking at the social structures and critiquing them and imagining and acting in a way, trying out new ways of being. And so organizations like ours and a whole bunch of others at one time were considered so radical and so anti-family and anti-men and anti all kinds of things, which that is not what Battered Women Support Services is at all. We want healthy families. And when I think about my grandmother, my maternal family comes from Sweden, and my maternal grandfather was horribly abusive, and they came from Sweden and they settled in Quesnel and were doing forestry. And my grandmother dealt with horrible things, as did all of the children, including the girl children. My mother went on to experience abuse in her relationships.
We have been trained. You are a good, quiet girl. You are polite. You are good. This is what you do. Don't make a fuss. Don't ever make a fuss. And it's important to know that we are allowed to make a fuss when we are not being treated right.
Yes. Yes.
And when you bring up financial abuse or emotional abuse, can you explain to me what emotional abuse would be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to think of emotional abuse as anything that makes you feel bad about yourself or makes you feel like you're crazy. That just sort of disorients your sense of what's going on. And that's so name calling. And there's often abusive partners will be really critical of, and there's no shortage of things to be critical of. And so talking about, parenting and, how
looks.
And that's the big one, is how we look. And that just fits in with all of the advertising media and all of the pressures that we have around how we look, and that in general, women are, valued so much about our appearance. And it's something that we certainly internalize about our appearance. And it's certainly something that I think a lot of men are raised to believe is what is valuable about women, is how women look. And so it's very powerful to criticize someone's looks in terms of being too thin or too fat or too old or too young, or various body parts that aren't appropriate, or looking or a particular way that is idealized. And so these are that's certainly one of the main ways that emotional abuse plays out, is criticism, and also then about how intelligent we are or not, and about being stupid or dumb or not being able to do things, and it's this chipping away at the sense of self. And for many survivors, victims, we may not have come into the relationship whole anyway. If we've witnessed our mother's abuse, we might be dealing with our own kinds of things. But even, those, I've talked to lots of women who have had really great families, and there was, a lot of equity in the father-mother dynamic. Then just slowly see their sense of themselves gets kind of chipped away by constant emotional abuse and playing mind games, denying someone's experiences. Show me the bruises. If I wanted to abuse you, I could really abuse you. Look at how big I am. I could, if I really wanted to hurt you, I could. You think you're abused. I'm the one that's abused. Denying, minimizing the experience.
Are you talking about gaslighting? Is that a good word to use here?
It's a really good 21st century, a very contemporary term to describe emotional abuse, gaslighting.
Because a lot of people use that word gaslighting, and I think it's now being used in the wrong way a lot of times. But maybe you would be the best person to explain what it means to gaslight somebody.
Yeah, it's basically to deny the experience and to impose an alternative reality onto what is a lived experience, and then to blame someone for any consequence of that. So it's just to deny the lived experiences and just to blame for what's happened. And it's very powerful, especially if we begin to not trust ourselves, not trust our experiences. We begin to doubt if this is even happening. And it's very crazy making, and it carries a lot of weight and a lot of power in just kind of unseating our core sense of ourselves and our core sense of what is real.
And we should also point out that women being in an abusive relationship, whether it be emotional, physical, it doesn't choose. This can happen to anybody. This doesn't just happen to poor women or vulnerable women or unemployed women, or explain that. This is a pandemic, a crisis for women.
It really is. And I think the reason why it looks like it might be poor women or women from various immigrant or ethnic groups or Indigenous women is in part because of how statistics are kept. Though services keep stats, and stats then are collected, and government and others then analyze those statistics. There are a whole portion of women that don't come to the attention of those statistics, and those are women that maybe have means. They might be able to to rent a hotel, or to go take a trip. Or to access resources around, and to be able to not come to the attention of the state in terms of stats. And so that's one reason why we think that it could be more about poor women, because if you're on income assistance, and if you come to a service, that gets collected as a stat.
Right.
And that matters a lot, because in understanding some of how things are, and it's also, I think, a belief, I think it's deliberate, is to have this idea that somehow certain groups are so flawed just in and of themselves that all these social problems are just sort of inherent with certain groups. And it allows other groups, dominant groups, to be not examined in any kind of way.
Angela, if someone's listening right now and they they don't need your services, but they've been inspired by you, as they should be, because you are incredible. How can we help? What can we do besides telling everybody about you and your services and what your organization does for women? What are some things that we can do to help? Do you need money? Do you need counselors? What do you need?
Mm-hmm. So first, I have to say is that I appreciate your compliments, and I this is a passion for me, and I've come to it based on my own experiences of witnessing abuse, my mother's abuse, my grandmother's abuse, and my own experiences as a girl and a young woman in dating relationships and as an adult. But I don't do this work without a whole team of amazing activists and advocates and counselors, support workers, volunteers that have been a part of Battered Women Support Services for 40 years. We've been doing this work, and I've been there for the last 17 years. So I'm a part of a team, and I just get to talk to you, which I'm really glad about.
But I know. I mean your whole team. I really do. I know there's a whole team at work.
And what we have really appreciated is that anybody that is concerned and wants to help, one of the main things that we can do right now, because unfortunately we have not seen the public sector kind of come in yet. There's been promises, but we haven't seen, is that your local transition house, women's group, sexual assault center does need your financial gift right now. There are very real expenses that are happening right now, and wherever you are in the province, there are frontline organizations that are that are doing that work and could use the benefit of your gift. We have a list of them on our website. And then, of course, Battered Women Support Services, we scaled up to 24 hours. We did that on a kind of because we needed to. It has, of course, increased our expenses, which we are, we are continue to. The only way we've been able to keep going so far is because of the help from individuals and and with their financial gifts. So if pick your local group and give a gift, or give a gift to Battered Women Support Services, we would. And there's some matching campaigns that are out there. Of course, there's more information that we can provide about those in terms of helping. We exist BWSS exists as a matrix of support services all across BC, all across Canada, and it's a result of this tight matrix that we can do the work that we've been doing. And our team of 25 appreciate any gift that anybody's able to give us.
I bet. Well, a big thank you to you, Angela, and to your team, and for all the work that you do. And I'll be happy. I love retweeting you. I just, you guys are doing great work. So I love helping, in the very least, to amplify your message, because it's important work. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with us. I really appreciate it. It
is my absolute pleasure, Tamara. And I just want to say, for the listeners that find this conversation difficult, it is a difficult conversation. And these are some things that are really important. But rest assured, there are lots of really great individuals that are on the front line doing really important work. And women are leaving right now in a pandemic. Women are leaving abusive relationships. And that's a good thing. And I thank you for the chance to be here today. It really matters.
Well, that's the least I can do. So thank you so much, Angela. Don't forget, you can go to BWSS's website. All the information that Angela and I spoke about is on their website, and how you can help them too. And be sure to join us here on TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart every Tuesday and Thursday.